I never thought walking into a gym could change my life. I signed up simply to get in shape, maybe lose a few pounds, but hiring Samuel, a trainer whose presence alone made my heart race, turned my routine upside down. It wasn't just about the workouts. It was about the connection, the unexpected discoveries about myself, and the way someone could push me to limits I didn't know existed. By the end, I realized I wasn't just stronger physically, I was stronger emotionally too. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and write in the comments which city you are listening from. This is very important for us. And now, enjoy listening. I still remember the first time I walked into the gym. The smell of sweat and metal hit me immediately, and I almost turned around. I had always avoided places like this. Gyms had a reputation for intimidating people like me, people who hadn't stepped on a treadmill in years, whose arms flinched at the mere thought of lifting weights. But I had decided enough was enough. My mornings, once leisurely with coffee and a book, had started to feel heavy, and my energy levels were non-existent. Something had to change. Signing up felt like a small victory, and yet, as I approached the front desk, my palms were clammy. That's when I met Samuel. He was leaning casually against the counter, the sunlight streaming through the glass highlighting the lines of his muscular frame. His smile wasn't the smirk of someone used to showing off. It was warm, inviting, and somehow grounding. He introduced himself as my potential trainer, and even as he extended his hand, I felt an unexpected jolt of awareness, an odd mixture of nervousness and curiosity. We scheduled a consultation, and I spent the next day worrying. I imagined the worst, being the weakest person in the room, struggling to keep up, and Samuel thinking I wasn't worth his time. But when I arrived for my first session, all of that dissolved in the energy of the gym itself. Samuel greeted me with a calm confidence that immediately eased my anxiety. He didn't make me feel small. Instead, he made me feel capable before I had even lifted a single dumbbell. Our first session was surprisingly gentle. He had a way of noticing the tiniest details. How I held my shoulders, the tilt of my neck, the tension in my back. He guided me patiently, explaining each movement, offering encouragement without ever being condescending. I remember the first time he said, "You've got this," with such certainty that I believed it for the first time in years. It wasn't just about the physical effort. It was about feeling seen, recognized, and capable. Afterwards, we sat for a few minutes while he explained my initial fitness plan. The gym around us hummed with life, people laughing, weights clanking, the occasional burst of music from a nearby speaker. And yet there was a quiet corner where it felt like it was just the two of us. The intensity in his eyes when he listened to me talk about my goals and fears was almost overwhelming. I realized how rare it was to be heard that way, without judgment, without rushing. Over the next few weeks, our sessions became the highlight of my week. I began noticing subtle changes in my body, of course, the way my arms felt stronger, the steadiness in my legs, but it was the mental shift that surprised me the most. Samuel had a way of pushing me gently beyond my limits, and somehow it felt safe, exciting, and deeply personal all at once. I started to look forward to mornings I used to dread, and the gym transformed from a place of anxiety into a sanctuary of self-discovery. One day, during a particularly challenging set of squats, I realized I was breathing harder, not just from exertion, but from an unexpected sense of pride. Samuel was beside me, counting reps, adjusting my form, his voice calm yet insistent. When I finished, he clapped softly and said, "I knew you could do it." That small sentence, paired with his steady gaze, sent a warmth through me I didn't fully understand. It wasn't romantic, at least not in the obvious way. It was deeper, more intricate. It was respect, admiration, and a quiet connection that seemed to transcend words. I also began to notice the subtleties in his approach, the way he remembered my small victories, the times he checked in just to ask how I was feeling, the little jokes that lightened the intensity of a session. These moments built something unexpected, a trust that made me push myself harder than I ever thought I could. I started taking better care of myself outside the gym too, noticing how I ate, how I slept, and how I carried myself. I had always thought change would come slowly, but with Samuel guiding me, it felt immediate, tangy. One evening, after an intense session of weights and cardio, we sat in the lounge area sipping water. The sun had begun to dip, casting golden streaks through the windows. Samuel talked about his own journey, how he had come to fitness not just for his body, but for his mind, his sense of purpose. I shared my own insecurities, things I hadn't admitted even to myself, and he listened, really listened. In that moment, I felt seen in a way that was almost startling. There was no judgment, only a shared understanding that change, no matter how small, was worth pursuing. Leaving the gym that day, I felt lighter, not just physically, but emotionally. I realized that this journey wasn't about the weights, the machines, or the sweat. It was about discovering my own strength, and about connecting with someone who saw me for who I was and gently encouraged me to be better. And as I walked to my car, the city lights flickering on around me, I couldn't help but think. I had no idea how much hiring Samuel would change my routine, or how much it would change me. I didn't expect our routine to evolve the way it did. By the second month, the gym had become a rhythm in my life I couldn't imagine living without. The first weeks had been about easing into strength, learning the ropes, and building trust. But now, Samuel had begun pushing me in ways that tested more than just my muscles. There were moments when I felt challenged, almost on the edge of giving up, but something in his steady presence kept me going. One morning, I arrived earlier than usual. The gym was quiet, only a few early risers moving between treadmills and machines, the soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Samuel was already there, stretching near the free weights. He looked up and smiled when he saw me, that same warm, reassuring smile that seemed to make the air a little lighter. "Good to see you early," he said, his voice low and calm. "I've got something new for you today." I followed him to the training area, curious and a little nervous. He handed me a resistance band and explained a series of exercises that I had never tried before. They were simple, yet deceptively difficult. My muscles burned almost immediately, a mix of strain and exhilaration. Samuel moved around me with careful precision, adjusting my posture, correcting my form, offering quiet encouragement. His hands occasionally brushed mine when helping me with positioning, fleeting touches that left a subtle warmth lingering long after. We worked in silence for several minutes, broken only by my labored breathing and the faint clank of weights in the background. I noticed how closely he watched me, not in a critical way, but with a focus that made me feel understood. It was strange, realizing how much I craved that attention, not for flattery, but because it made me feel capable. I was more than my fears, more than my insecurities. Samuel made me see that. During a break, we sat on the floor, stretching our legs. The gym felt almost empty, the morning sunlight streaming in through tall windows, casting long, warm shadows across the room. I caught myself studying him, noticing the small details, the curve of his smile when he encouraged me, the way his eyes softened when he listened, even the quiet strength in the lines of his arms. I felt a flutter in my chest, a mix of admiration, curiosity, and something I couldn't quite name. "You're progressing faster than I expected," he said, his tone casual, yet I sensed the genuine pride behind it. "Your form is improving, and your strength. It's remarkable." I smiled, a little embarrassed but proud. "Thanks. I feel different. Stronger, I think." "That's the goal," he said softly. Then, after a pause, he added, "And it's not just physical strength. I can see your mindset shifting too. You're learning to trust yourself." His words lingered with me longer than I expected. Trust myself. It sounded simple, But I realized I hadn't done that in years, not fully. I had relied on routines, on habits, on avoiding discomfort. But here, under Samuel's guidance, I was discovering a courage I didn't know I had. Our sessions grew more intense over the weeks. Samuel introduced new challenges, from balance exercises that made my legs shake to circuit training that left me gasping for air. Each time I thought I couldn't push any further, he was there, not hovering, not pressuring, just present, steady, encouraging. And every time I surprised myself. My body was changing, yes, but more importantly, my mind was shifting. I was learning resilience, focus, and a new appreciation for my own capabilities. Outside the gym, I began noticing subtle shifts in my daily life. I walked with a little more confidence, I laughed more easily, and I felt a growing anticipation for our sessions that I couldn't fully explain. Samuel wasn't just a trainer anymore. He was a presence that had quietly seeped into my thoughts. There was a gentle tension between us, unspoken and entirely consensual, a connection that carried its own weight. It was thrilling and comforting at the same time, like standing on the edge of something unknown but safe. One afternoon, after an especially grueling session of strength training, we lingered longer than usual. I sat on the bench, catching my breath, feeling the sweat cool on my skin. Samuel crouched beside me, offering a towel and water. Our hands brushed as I took the bottle from him, and I caught the faintest spark of electricity in that touch. I laughed nervously, looking down, and he smiled, not in amusement, but with understanding. "You're doing better than you think," he said quietly. "I see it in every movement, every choice you make." The intensity of his gaze made me aware of my own heartbeat. There was a closeness now, a quiet intimacy in the shared struggle and triumph. It wasn't about romance, or at least not in the conventional sense. It was about vulnerability, trust, and mutual respect. We were two people pushing boundaries, learning from each other, and discovering strength in unexpected ways. By the end of that session, my legs were trembling, my arms sore, and yet I felt a profound sense of exhilaration. I realized that the gym was no longer just a place for physical training. It was a place for discovery. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of clarity about who I was and what I could become. Walking out into the crisp evening air, the city lights reflecting on the pavement, I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and euphoria. Samuel waved as I left, and I waved back, feeling an unexpected warmth in that simple gesture. I had no idea where this journey would take me, but I knew one thing for certain. My life and my sense of self was changing in ways I had never imagined. And for the first time, I looked forward to not just the next session, but to the growing connection that was quietly reshaping everything I thought I knew about myself. By the time we reached the third month, the gym had become more than a routine. It was a sanctuary, a place where the world outside ceased to exist, and all that mattered was the rhythm of breath, movement, and connection. Samuel and I had developed an unspoken understanding, a silent language built through gestures, glances, and shared effort. Each session felt like peeling back another layer of myself, revealing strengths I hadn't acknowledged before. One late afternoon, the gym was nearly empty. The hum of machines had softened to a distant background noise, the sunlight fading into the worn glow of overhead lights. I was midway through a challenging circuit of squats and lunges when I realized Samuel was standing closer than usual, observing not just my form, but the way I moved with determination. His presence was grounding, but also electrifying in a way I hadn't anticipated. "You're holding your back too stiffly," he said gently, moving behind me to adjust my posture. His hands brushed mine for a fraction of a second, and I felt a jolt, not just from the touch, but from the intensity of his focus. "Relax into it. You've got this." I nodded, trying to focus on the exercise, but my mind kept drifting. There was something about the quiet care in his voice, the way he guided without pressure, that made me feel both exposed and safe. It was a delicate balance, one I was starting to crave. After the set, we moved to the free weights. Samuel suggested I try heavier dumbbells than I had before. My hands trembled as I gripped them, my muscles protesting, but I didn't want to disappoint him or myself. He stood beside me, ready to assist if needed, his calm presence giving me courage. Each lift was a small battle, yet every successful repetition was a victory that made my chest swell with pride. "You're stronger than you realize," he said after I finished the set, his voice soft but deliberate. I caught his gaze, and for a moment it lingered longer than usual. I felt an unspoken connection, a subtle tension that made my heart beat faster. It wasn't flirtation in the obvious sense. It was deeper, more intimate. It was recognition of effort, respect, and perhaps something neither of us had fully named yet. We took a break, sitting on adjacent benches. I was still catching my breath, my skin glistening with sweat, and Samuel handed me a water bottle. Our fingers brushed briefly, and I felt a warmth spreading through me. I laughed nervously, looking down. "You're improving every session," he said. "Not just physically, but mentally too. You trust yourself more now." His words hit me in a way I hadn't expected. Trust myself. It had become a mantra over the past few months, a quiet transformation I had started to notice not just in the gym, but in life. I felt more capable, more resilient, and more willing to embrace discomfort because I knew it would lead to growth. After a pause, he continued, "There's something about the way you push yourself that's inspiring. Most people don't reach this point, not just in terms of strength, but in willingness to be vulnerable and honest with themselves." I turned to look at him, surprised by the depth of his words. I didn't expect that," I admitted. "I thought this was just about exercise, about getting fit." He shook his head slightly, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Fitness is never just about the body. It's about discovering who you are when you're challenged, and you've done that beautifully." There was a moment of silence, charged but unspoken, where we simply sat and absorbed the intensity of the session, the warmth of the gym, and the subtle closeness between us. It was intimate in a way I hadn't anticipated, a quiet emotional connection that made the space feel smaller, more personal. Later, as I packed up my things, Samuel lingered near the door. "You've come a long way," he said, his voice gentle. "And I think you're ready for something new, something a little more challenging. Are you willing to try?" I felt a thrill run through me. The idea of pushing beyond what I thought possible was exciting, yes, but it was the thought of doing it with him, under his guidance, that made my chest tighten in anticipation. "Yes," I said, with more confidence than I expected. The next session was even more intense. Samuel introduced a circuit combining strength, balance, and endurance exercises, each movement designed to test not only my body, but my focus and determination. At first, I struggled, my muscles shaking and my breath coming in ragged bursts. But Samuel's calm presence, his quiet encouragement, and the careful attention he paid to every detail of my form kept me grounded. During a pause in the workout, he helped me stretch, adjusting my posture with gentle, precise movements. I could feel the heat of his hands through my shirt, and a subtle tension lingered in the air. I realized how much I had come to rely on his guidance, not just physically, but emotionally. There was trust here, a connection built on mutual respect and shared effort, and it was powerful in a way I had never expected from a gym session. As the session ended, I was exhausted, my body trembling from exertion, but a deep sense of accomplishment filled me. I looked at Samuel, feeling a mix of admiration, gratitude, and a warmth I hadn't fully understood until that moment. He nodded, acknowledging my effort, and I realized that this journey, this unexpected, emotional, transformative experience, was far from over. Walking out of the gym that evening, I felt a profound sense of growth. not just in my muscles, not just in my stamina, but in my heart. Samuel had become more than a trainer. He was a guide, a confidant, and a witness to my transformation. And as the city lights flickered against the darkening sky, I couldn't help but feel that the next chapter of this journey held even more discovery, intimacy, and unexpected revelations.